Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 33rd Global Public Seminar in Comparative and International Education. My name is Maya Changseliani. I'm Associate Professor of Comparative and International Education at Oxford. Before introducing our speaker, Tatiana Fumasolli, I would like to attend to a few administrative points. This webinar is being recorded, as you might have noticed when you joined, and we will post the recording of the webinar online in due course. I would like to ask you to keep yourself muted throughout the webinar, unless you are invited to speak, to share your comments or questions. As you will listen to the talk, probably you will have comments, questions arising. Please put them in the chat. You do not need to spell out the entire question or comment. Just give me an indication that you want to speak. So when the talk finishes, I will go one by one, invite you to come in, to introduce yourself, to turn on your video if you would like to, and to share your question or comment, and the speaker will take them one by one. Now let me introduce our speaker, Professor Tatiana Fumasolli. I'm delighted to be hosting Tatiana today. She is Professor of Higher Education Studies at UCL Faculty of Education and Society. UCL is University College London in the UK. She is Director of the UCL Centre for Higher Education Studies. Tatiana Fumasolli's research interests lie at the intersection between management studies, organization theory, and sociology of professions and expertise. Tatiana has led several international projects focusing on global governance, strategic management, and the academic profession. Her research activities investigate new practices of internationalization, of crisis management, of networks of innovation in teaching and learning in higher education. She is currently leading a World Bank-funded project on internationalization and research governance for the Ministry of Education and Science in Georgia. She has done lots of work in higher education in all of those areas that I listed across the world, and Asia, and specifically Hong Kong, is one of those places. So her talk today will be about the role of Hong Kong universities in the emerging Greater Bay Area. The floor is yours, Tatiana.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you for the nice introduction. And hello, everybody. So it's very nice to be here. And when Maya invited me, I thought, okay, which topic I'm researching at the moment should I should I present? And I think in the end, I decided for one of my favorites, really. And so I'm gonna present my research on the Greater Bay Area and the role of universities in there. So 1 second, and I'm going to share my presentation. Okay. Okay, so the title of my presentation is The Emerging Greater Bay Area and the Strategic Responses of Hong Kong Universities. So before starting with the analytical framework, the research questions, and so on, I would like to show, for those who don't know the Greater Bay Area, what I am talking about, because it seems to me this is quite a fascinating development in higher education that should be of interest for those who look into policy, into management and strategy like me, but also into regional studies and innovation. So this is the map of China, and you can see, so it's the size of the country, and you can see in yellow here that is the Greater Bay Area. So it's quite small and tiny compared to the overall country. And if we look at the details of the Greater Bay Area, we can see that it is divided in several cities, and most cities are Chinese in mainland China, in Guangdong, and then now we have Hong Kong and Macau, which are usually called SAR. So this is just to show where the Greater Bay Area is. Also, something that I wanted to say is that although the Greater Bay Area in mainland China is in the province in Guangdong province, in reality, it's not the whole Guangdong, but it's just all these cities that I mentioned. So it's nine cities plus Macau and Hong Kong, and originally this was called the river, the Pearl River area. So it has been now renamed the Greater Bay Area, integrating Hong Kong and Macau. And then some numbers in this little table that I prepared a few months back, just to see the difference in comparison between Hong Kong and Macau, the Guangdong province for which I found all data, and some data about the GBA. And here, what I would like to show is the significant difference in size between Guangdong province and Hong Kong and Macau. So we can see the population, 126 million in Guangdong province and more than 7 million in Hong Kong and less than 1 in Macau. When it comes to the GDP, it is probably relatively the difference is smaller, but still, Guangdong province is one of the most developed and industrialized regions in mainland China. A difference where instead Hong Kong and Macau do better is GDP per capita, and where they do also better is Human Development Index. However, when we look at the Gini index, which is one of the measures for inequality, we can see that the situation is quite there are several differences, but in the end, Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong province are not so different. Or in any case, there is a lot of differences among the three. And then finally, so the languages, so English and mainly I would say Cantonese in Hong Kong, and then of course in the Guangdong province it's also Cantonese, but then Mandarin would be the main language. And then when we look at the higher education systems, we can see here is just the number of what we would call universities. So it's not higher education institutions. We have 12 in Hong Kong, 10 in Macau, and 160 in the whole of Guangdong. So it is what I would call the multi-layered policy context, because as I said, there used to be the Pearl River Delta area, which was already an area of interest for economic development for mainland China. There are also special economic zones and different categories, for instance, the city of Shenzhen, which is a quite recent city, but definitely one of the most developed, economically developed now in China. And then there are the several, I would say, development policies of mainland China, like a One Belt and One Road initiative, made in China 2025 and so on. And then, as I said, Hong Kong and Macau are so-called special administrative regions. And also, although the Greater Bay Area was originally rather a top-down project, a policy project in China, we can see now the emergence of several layers of policy control and responsibilities with the central government in Beijing, but then there are the province. There is the province. There are several cities, and as I said, Hong Kong and Macau. So the Greater Bay area officially was, I would say, unofficially in 2015, but officially was born in 2019. So it is really quite recent when the GBA plan was prepared by the central government. And It's quite an interesting document if you have a chance to read it, and it doesn't talk only about higher education. Actually, it speaks more about quality of life, cities, industrial development, innovation, and so on. However, universities are meant to play a key role, and in some way, this reminds of the EU Lisbon strategy, where universities were meant to become the engines of socioeconomic development in the knowledge society and knowledge economy. Um, so, what are the main goals of the GBA of the construction of the GBA? Build an integrated economic and business hub and a thriving global center of technology, innovation, and economic vibrancy. And it is quite clear, quite explicit that the GBA and also the name come from there, Greater Bay Area, is also an area that should compete at the same level with other Bay Areas, but in particular with the San Francisco Bay Area, with all its um, innovative and high quality universities, innovation, and so on. So this is where the policy discourse and the policy content of the document is focused on. So it is to establish an area of innovation and technology that can become one of the most important, like San Francisco, Tokyo Bay Area, or New York, and so on, but maybe even the most important in the world. So why is it important for us to know about the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area? So why is it relevant? And of course, there are several angles we can look at it, even if we just look from a higher education perspective. And there is a more political angle, which is the integration of the former colonies of Hong Kong and Macau into mainland China. And some would say that this is one way for the mainland Chinese government to um, politically integrate even more Hong Kong and Macau. For some, it's also taking advantage of particular resources that are in Hong Kong and Macau, not last human capital, for instance, and so on. Then it is a case for, as I said, at least in originally rather central planning, so top down, to devise a high-tech innovation region, which probably sounds a bit counterintuitive because when we look at the literature and scholarship on innovation and how innovation should be fostered, the element of bottom up remains quite important. So this is a way to do high tech innovation in steering from the top. Then, as I said, the universities are considered key actors in establishing this regional area or cross-border area of innovation. Um, and then for those who are more interested in maybe in regionalism and regional studies and so on, it is about the nature of the evolving border between these areas and the multiple agencies, so the multiple actors that are through collaboration, through cooperation and partnerships and any type of interaction are constantly reconstructing or constructing over the original border, which was a border. I mean, it was a political border. And finally, it is also a case of well, some say integration, some others say maybe just kind of pulling together different political, economic, social, cultural, and linguistic areas. So there is quite a lot of diversity. So just to make an example of the fact that the three areas, so Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, really have different weights, different positions, and definitely different ambitions, we could look at the flows across the border when it comes to higher education. And at least at the moment, because as I said, it evolves constantly. When we look at human capital, knowledge, expertise, the flow is particularly from Hong Kong towards mainland China. And when it comes to so-called international students, so students from China, the flow tends still to be more from China uh, to Hong Kong. And then finally, although I'm not really going to talk about that, there is the specific role for higher education, and is the role of academic freedom once the universities in Hong Kong and in Macau will be further integrated to mainland China. So at this point, I just would like to say that this presentation is based on a paper that I have co-written with Fumi Kitagawa at University of Birmingham, and Fumi is an expert both of higher education and regional studies. So this is a paper that we are currently revising that is quite focused on original studies, and you will see how I will going to do the analysis and the analytical framework. Okay, so our questions are: how do universities engage strategically with the GBA? How do universities use their individual and collective agency and to interact with the GBA? And how can we understand the factors influencing universities' strategic responses? We used several types of data, but mainly this is desk research with policy and institutional documents, statistical data, and also grey literature. And this paper is based only on English text. And the analysis is a two-step analysis. So as I said, here we concentrate on the universities in Hong Kong. So the analysis is first a mapping of the Hong Kong universities and their engagement with the GBA. And then we selected the 3 institutions for a cross-case study. Okay, so I was saying that this is based on regional studies, regionalism literature. So we are looking at the Greater Bay Area as a cross-border region, which is a combination of territorial units that are contiguous, of national or subnational territories from 2 or more nation states. And in this case, we definitely have one nation state, and as I said, we have 2 special administrative regions, so Hong Kong and Macau. And so there are several environments, several contexts that come together. So geographical, social, economic, political, and institutional level. And in fact, this is quite a case of significant diversity. And then, as I was also mentioning in the introduction, the border between these places is changing over time, and it is shaped and reshaped by diverse sets of local, regional, national, and also, especially in the case of Hong Kong, probably global processes. So another concept that we use is cross-border innovation, and we use a cross-border innovation because of the nature of the policy that is represented by the Greater Bay Area. So this is the interaction between local, regional, national, and global flows of knowledge and innovation that might bring competitive advantages to those involved in it. And hopefully, with my presentation, I will show how universities feel about the advantages, the competitive advantages that they have, and what they can they can gain in their interest participating in the GBA. And then cross-border regional innovation systems, because we are also looking at the governance of innovation, which is usually the coordination of policies at multiple scales and across institutionally diverse territories. And well, as I said before, there are several challenges when we put together different countries, different territories, especially across borders. And finally, which probably is one of the key points of this study, is what is called the policy capability, which means in the case of universities, do universities have a sufficient level of autonomy, which is understood as legal competencies, financial resources, etc., in order to participate in the governance mechanisms of innovation. Okay, and then so finally, some more references to the role of universities in cross-border regions and cross-border regional innovations. So some have called the universities anchor institutions because they possess innovation-driven, or they should possess innovation-driven leadership. They are also considered place-based leaders, meaning that they can make a relation between their leadership, the place where they are, and what they make to this place at those levels that I was mentioning before: political, social, resources, and so on. And and in the end, this is more the proposition, or the working hypothesis of the paper, is that the universities can mobilize resources and actionable knowledge to create and transform institutions in a place. So in the end, my presentation is what is the university leadership role as key anchor institutions being part of a cross-border innovation processes, considering that this is definitely not the first regional cross-border regional innovation system, but it is in a, as I said, it is in a context where there is one country, which is the largest and more powerful part of all this cross-border cooperation, that also has a centralized government and centralized policies. Okay. So I'm not sure I should stay too long on that. So it's a cross-case study with a controlled comparison. We wanted to identify variation in how each university may elaborate its own logic and explain and rationalize its own position and engagement in the Greater Bay Area. It has an analytical aim versus empirical generalization, and the sample that we will see in a minute is a sample of universities that did different things. And so the main goal is to explain why universities in Hong Kong, so in a controlled area of the Greater Bay Area, given the same type of incentives, they responded differently to these incentives. Okay, so as I said, the first time that the creation of a Greater Bay Area was mentioned was in '94, and this came from the former president of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And this is quite interesting because this is one of the universities in our case study. And then, as I said, in 2019, the Chinese central government officially launched the GBA plan. And so here just some other details on how the GBA, or I would say mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau, have been described over time. So one country, two system, this is a policy definition. 3 legal systems, 3 customs zone, and so on. So I'm not going to repeat what is written there, but I still would like to highlight that while the GBA has been created uh, centrally by the government in Beijing, it has become more and more evident that then from Beijing, so the allocation of resources first, but also the allocation of responsibilities have been distributed. And so now there are really several actors, not only at state level with the province and the cities and the SARS, but also with business industry actors, the universities, and so on. And so, what are the expectations from universities? Well, the expectations from universities is to play a role in scientific, technological, and innovation development, and particularly to create cross-border university partnerships, branch campuses, joint education, and also research programs. So this is what the universities have been asked to do, and this is also where the incentives, several types of incentives actually, have been created in order for universities to engage. And then I should mention that well, the plan, the GBA plan was launched in 2019, but then it came almost to a halt because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19, and at some point, some of the observers were almost kind of dreading that everything would just slow down and kind of died out. Instead, it's rather the opposite, and now it's really quite dynamic. Okay, and finally, so for Beijing, it is an urgent task for multiple sectors of society, including government, universities, and in industries, to create a world-class higher education cluster. So we will see that when we look at the universities, because we looked at all the universities in Hong Kong, Macau, and in Guangdong, and clearly Hong Kong has some of the best universities in the world, and in comparison with the Guangdong province, clearly still there is quite some difference in that, and this is why probably there is also an expectation that the excellence, in global status and reputation of universities in Hong Kong should, in the end, serve the development of the homeland of China. This is clearly stated multiple times in the plan, in the GBA plan. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly go through the history of the sector of Hong Kong, because it's quite interesting. So Hong Kong University, which is created on a British model, was created in 1911, and then there was a Chinese University of Hong Kong in 1963. But then most of the universities were created from the 90s onwards, and I would say probably, or at least in parallel with the coming closer to the handover of Hong Kong to China. Anyway, as I said, there are 5 universities in Hong Kong that are in the top 100 of the QS ranking. So here we come to the first case. So, and it is Hong Kong University, which could be called individual activities with little institutional engagement in the GBA. So, as the oldest and among the largest universities in Hong Kong, also quite internationalized, and not only internationalized as in number of students from mainland China, but also from across the world. So it calls itself Asia's Global University. And so it is quite a traditional, Western model of university. But when we look at all the policy documents, websites, and all what they do quite a lot. They have quite a lot of activities with the Chinese universities across all China, but also in particular in the Guangdong province. However, these activities look more like the usual activities that universities would do with international partners. So it can be some joint research institutes, it can be some joint programs. Definitely, there is an exchange of students, Hong Kong students that go to mainland China, and so on. They also get, as I said, a lot of Chinese students. But it is traditional research and education collaborations that in the end one would find in any university. I mean, not only in the GBA. Then the second case is the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. You remember the president was the first one to mention the creation of the GBA in the 90s. And this is called an emerging institutional cross-border leadership, because this is the case of a university in Hong Kong that is really, how can I say, joining not only for research and education for specific projects or specific institutes, for instance, but that is joining really institutionally China. And one probably the most important event was the creation of the campus in Guangzhou in 2022, and which is a legal and financial separate entity. However, when one look at the strategic goals, it is very clear that the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology aim at doubling facilities, resources, and activities in Guangzhou. And so it is quite clear that what they say is there is an opportunity to grow our own university, and in order to do that, we will do it on the basis of, say, an equal partnership with our mainland Chinese counterpart. And just for your information, so they started in 2023 to recruit students, and we can see that it's mainly Chinese students and some universities from Hong Kong and Macau and Taiwan, and also from overseas. So this is the case of the most institutionalized type of collaboration across border in the GBA. And finally, there is, I think this is quite an interesting case, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, light touch cross-border involvement. I think this one is really quite strategic, and it is very well outlined in the documents, but also in the reports on activities, etc. And they clearly state, well, we want to leverage the infrastructure and the resources in mainland China to support our research programs. And we want to strengthen further knowledge transfer activities, identifying strategic partners in China, and we want to play an increased role in the GBA and in other policies of mainland China. And also we see the GBA as an increasing the opportunities for the students to engage in learning experiences in mainland China. However, what they also very clearly explain in all their documents is that we see an opportunity. The opportunity is for us to grow through partnership with institutions in mainland China. However, there are some sensitive issues, and they speak about governance models for cross-border activities, and also rather in a managerial style, they speak about diversifying international students and not depending too much only on mainland China. And then I think the main institutions that they have created in the GBA, like the GBA International Institute for Innovations and the GBA Collaborative Platforms, they seem to reflect this type of attitude and to say we are ready to do partnerships, but because we can see that you have a lot of resources to offer from mainland China, but we also need to be clear on the way we build our partnerships. Okay, so as I said, so if we look at the literature on cross-border innovation and leadership, we can find that these different three levels of engagement. So the highest level of engagement, which is the more institutionalized, the one of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, then a kind of a lighter touch. Let's take advantage of all the opportunities, but also be clear on the limits that we want to have for ourselves in the collaboration for the PolyU, and then University of Hong Kong is picking and choosing traditional ways of engaging in education and research. So this is a model that exists in the literature and is meant to be a time related model. So you start with individual activities, then it becomes a bit more cross-border involvement, and finally it is institutionalized. And there is this idea that over time everybody will get to the institutional cross-border leadership. I'm not sure about that. I think it's more about parallel ways of um, engaging. So how can we explain the different engagement of these three universities with the GBA, considering that the policy incentives are quite significant, and probably also there will be some pressure. And for the universities in Hong Kong, there is also a limit to growth because of the nature of Hong Kong. And so there is also probably an ambition also to use or to participate in the GBA to grow further. So mainly, it depends on the institutional strategy. For instance, Hong Kong University being older, more traditional global research university, so maybe can afford a wait and see position in that. Then there is a strategic positioning, so younger and more dynamic institutions that leverage economic incentives to set up ambitious growth plan for themselves, like a PolyU. And then, depending on the disciplinary portfolio, probably some university would feel better, how can I say, more familiar to work across the GBA. So the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, clearly the GPA plan is about science and technology, STEM subjects. So it is also probably easier to collaborate on those in those disciplines and disciplinary fields. So what I just wanted to say to conclude is yes, so there are different institutional responses that depends primarily on the different nature of the universities themselves. And as I said, so it's disciplinary portfolio, age, institutional age, organizational culture, global standing, and competitive edge. However, not the size. So we have seen that PolyU is engaging rather actively, and PolyU is as big as University of Hong Kong University. And then finally, I would say that it's quite remarkable to see that in the strategic plans, in the websites and missions and so on, there are also specific websites dedicated to the GBA engagements. The universities in Hong Kong, they seem to rather compete among themselves, so they don't think about, oh, we are the Hong Kong universities, but they just act as they are big, important, and powerful enough to engage with the GBA. I thought that that is quite interesting, and it speaks quite a lot about the history of Hong Kong, really. So at least for now, even if there is a special rectors conference for the GBA and so on, but for now, in Hong Kong, the universities they strategize for themselves, and they see themselves partnering with the whole of the GBA rather than together with the other Hong Kong universities. I think this is my last. This is really my last slide, and it is more general. So what we can say from this study are the evolving roles that are played by central, regional, and local governments that offer these different incentives, and the universities are able to leverage either one or the other, depending on what really they want to do. And as I said, depending on their history, culture, organizational identities, and so on. There are some emerging collective and individual forms of university leaderships, and these are being created through all these interactions with the key stakeholders. But at the moment, considering the resources that are available, I think that we are still rather I wouldn't say the first stage of the GBA when it comes to higher education, but I would say it's still rather early to understand how the integration is going to happen and to what extent actually is going to happen. And so there are different forms of investment, levels of collaboration and partnerships, and that define the cross-border innovation processes over time, and I would expect that they keep changing again. And maybe some of you know there are also new institutions being created, and some institutions will be GBA universities, so they are created exactly to play a central role in the region, in the GBA, rather than in Guangdong province, Hong Kong, or Macau. And finally, there are also some contradictory competing conditions that influence the leadership of the universities. And at the moment, it's still quite, when it comes to Hong Kong, it's still quite atomized and individual, but as it is evolving rather, I would say, quickly, but more is evolving rather intensively. One would expect that the universities in Hong Kong, even though they are the best universities in the whole of the GPA, will probably have to retune a bit their strategy and reconsider some of the opportunities from the GPA.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. This was really very interesting for me. I learned a lot from your presentation. We have also some questions coming in. Before I invite David first, just a quick question. So you mentioned towards the end that new GBA universities are created. So can you tell us a little bit more where and how does that work?
Well, there is, I would say that it's really like, you know, a cauldron of things that are kind of not boiling over, but that are really at least I don't know how to say, at least getting hotter and hotter. And there is the GBA university that has been created, but as I said, that there were a lot of ambitious plans at 2019, and then everything, because particularly in mainland China and for such a long time everything was quite stopped. It took quite a hit, and now is restarting again. So I would say that mainland China, I would say Hong Kong and Macau, they're not interested to create new universities. I don't think they even have the space to create new universities, but mainland China is, and one could see this cynically as a way to grab probably what's the type of expertise and knowledge and also human capital that there is in Hong Kong, and then pull it over towards China. So there is more and more increasing mobility of academics from Hong Kong and Macau that would go and work maybe just 1 2 days a week, or maybe they would just move for another job. And the problem I would say, now I'm coming with my strategic hat as expert from strategy. I would say if I look at that, I see a giant with a lot of resources, but not so good universities. And we know that in China now, in Beijing, for instance, there are top universities, but not particularly in this area, not particularly in Guangdong. So they are trying to do partnerships to do offshore campuses from Hong Kong, and they are also setting up new universities and try and attract, but also cluster so-called talent, if I may say.
Thank you, Tatiana. We have questions here, so let's try to get to them. David, would you like to come in and ask your question, please?
Sure, yes, thank you very much, Maya, and fascinating, Tatiana. Really nice to meet you, and I learned a
Me
lot
too.
as well. So I guess my question was really about the ways in which often money is a great incentive for universities to do things together. And clearly there's all sorts of policy sort of discourses and initiatives that are coming from universities themselves and from provincial governments. But to what extent is there something akin to what's happening in the EU, either with money like Horizon, where you have to bid together, or even Erasmus, where you have to, there's funding for student mobility, where again you have to bid together. So there's almost a sort of a way in which I guess my question is, does this exist? And if not, why is the Chinese government not doing that at a state level? Have you got any sort of thoughts on that?
Okay, I'm not aware that there is such a complicated, sometimes a beautiful mechanism like Horizon, ERC, and so on at the GBA level. But you are right. So first, yes, I would say the EU is the first example that comes to mind about a cross-border regional innovation and so on. But the political system is different, and it's different because EU countries work, or let's say the countries in Horizon working together are on an equal position, equal standing, and also the EU is, well, a bureaucratic but still a democratic project, while China is rather different, and this is what makes it so fascinating, because how can you do this if you don't have um, I would say, a kind of a democratic context for once, and you don't have such a centralized government. And second, if one thinks about the US, you don't have such kind of a market mechanisms that really work well. So so the GBA is really different, and we are looking at it live. So we can only guess what is going to happen, and we can observe. We can look at that. So about the incentives. So the incentives is really, so the GPA is a plan for everything. It's not only about higher education, but so the resources made available are very important. And you mentioned money, and definitely it's money. But I would say, if I think about Hong Kong, there are resources such as land that are available that in Hong Kong are practically not available anymore. Now they are discussing some small empty space that has remained in Hong Kong, and so this is quite so. The imbalance of overall resources is absolutely incredible. And on one side, that you have a status, history, and rankings, and definitely very good at education. And on the other side, you have well, we just have to we have to see what your role is, but then we can provide a lot of incentives. And I guess this is why Hong Kong University still remains a bit behind, because, well, probably they think they are successful enough, they might not need it. There is also this idea and this self-understanding of being a global university, and sometimes one tends to forget the geography, for instance. And again, I'm talking about growth really, and where you get the students. But also because of its history, clearly it's probably the most suspicious university when it comes to Chinese authority and this double structure of Communist Party and academic leadership.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but definitely this is this. So there are several cases of this type of regionalism. So one definitely is the EU, also with all the mergers and so on, the university initiative. There is also the case of the ASEAN regionalism in that area for a higher kind of a common share, the higher education area, and so the kind of the main question overall, beyond the GBA, etc., is what are the conditions to create these cross-border innovation areas? Now, San Francisco is not a cross-border innovation area; it's a national area. But in the end, we always go back to there, and we explain that with entrepreneurial personalities, market mechanism, excellent higher education. Well, maybe there are other ways, and we just have to wait and see.
Thank you so much. Actually, Tatiana, you may not know that David, Rachel, who will be will ask the next question, Rachel Brooks and Lee Rensimer, we are editing, and Tristan McCowan, we are editing a special issue of the International Journal of Educational Research on regional spaces in higher education. So there is definitely scarcity of research on this phenomenon that you just explained. So I can even share a link to this and can send you via email as well later. So if you will have any further papers, please feel free to submit to this, or even people in the audience wanted to submit anything to us. We just had an exchange that our submission deadline is mid-January, so.
Oh yeah, I didn't know about that. Yes, very
good,
interesting. I will look at that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And next question from Rachel, please, Rachel, and then we will take the last two questions together to respond to everyone.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, Tatiana. I really enjoyed your presentation. I was just wondering if you could say a bit about the impact, if any, of this on student flows between China and Hong Kong, because you mentioned student flows right at the beginning, but I was just wondering whether we see any impact, I suppose, both in terms of kind of short-term mobility as part of a degree, based, where you're staying at your home institution, but also whole degree mobility too.
Yes, there are all sorts of combinations that one can see. I wouldn't be able at this moment to say if any has become significant enough. But when it comes, I think what is interesting when it comes to the flows, I was saying in the beginning that there is a flows of, let's say, knowledge, intellect, and so on towards mainland China, and then the mainland Chinese students go into particularly to Hong Kong, and there is a special policy for that, and there is quite a lot of funding from Guangdong and from Beijing. There is also a special title. I took it away from my presentation. I can't remember. I think it's something like a China Vision, and it is about getting students in Hong Kong from Hong Kong to Chinese universities and study there, but not to get a degree, but just have sometimes it's even just a placement somewhere, or to go and get lectures there. And it's very clear it's to be exposed to mainland China culture, higher education, and so on. And that is clearly something that, so the government gives the resources. It appears in every single strategic plan or every university. There are special not programs, but there are special mechanisms to do that. And then the Hong Kong students go to China. So as I said, is not is something that is still quite politically or policy driven, and we will see if this is going to become sustainable in any other way. I was reading recently another research, which is still not, it was a paper I was reviewing actually, and it was quite interesting because it is becoming the case really as for academic mobility. So the academic mobility is now quite important. Hong Kong to China, but also it's about, because in the end, if you are in the GBA, it's like being in a big city. So yeah, there is one border. It's quite annoying to cross over that border, but otherwise it's like taking the underground or the overground and then move around. So even if I didn't really focus on that today, because it's not really the focus of this study, I would say that the political dimension is still quite important. And the border, the most important border still remain the border between a border that used to be a historical border, yeah, between countries.
Thank you so much. I really want to take this last question, if that's okay. Danagul, please can you come in and ask your question briefly? And then I will invite Jay.
Thank you so much, Professor. Well, my question is about how these latest developments are impacting the organizational identity change at these regions.
Okay, thank you. And Jay, please come in and ask your most important question. One.
I was thank you, Professor. And I was wondering, because you mentioned when you were analyzing the university's strategic responses to the GBA, you mentioned like their discipline profile. So I was just wondering, like, what about the proportions of academic staff with mainland background or those who can like speak Mandarin? Because you mentioned like language differences among the area. So I was just wondering about that aspect.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for these questions. Okay, organizational identity, as I mentioned, this is based on policy documents analysis. So I don't think I can say anything about organizational identity, but I would say, even just because it is even if it is piecemeal, is going to become like this, and also is going to become more mixed. And if we speak about Hong Kong identities and let's say mainland Chinese identities, is going to become more and more mixed. At the moment, quite a piecemeal. Organizational identity, as in the universities. From the documents, I would say the following. I would say that it depends more, at the moment, it still depends more on the disciplines. And I think that when you are, for instance, in STEM, you might find more of a common ground with across the border, across any border really, rather than maybe social sciences and humanities. But this is definitely, so the changing organizational identities of universities, that would be the next step. That's a very, very excellent question. And then when it comes to Yayi question about language differences, well, it appears that actually Mandarin is becoming more important. I wouldn't say the most important, but more important rather than others, because mostly for practical reasons, maybe, because it's everybody would speak some Mandarin rather than everybody would speak some Cantonese. So some preliminary data that I have seen, so just preliminary, would say that this is also moving in a language perspective, and it's moving towards a more pragmatic solution. Well, maybe it's also, yeah, I would say at the moment I would see this as a pragmatic solution.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. It was really enjoyable. Sorry, were you saying something? Did I interrupt you?
No, I just wanted to say finally concerning languages, I would
Yes.
say that one of the things that surprised me in the very beginning of this study was looking at these international students and staff in Hong Kong. And yes, they are definitely more internationalized than in Guangdong universities, but still it's quite, so they categorize mainland China students as international. So I think that overall, yeah, it's international depending on the definition, and and it is becoming more and more Chinese. Yeah, I would say this is just by observation. I don't mean it to make any judgment.
So Jaili is my student who is doing her doctorate on this topic. So you will read more.
Okay,
Course.
That's great.
It was wonderful to host you, Tatiana. I'm so grateful that you found time to speak to us and gave this really interesting presentation. I would like to thank everyone who stayed to the end. It was a really good discussion, so thank you, everyone. Our next webinar will take place on the 11th of December. Professor Asma Al-Fadala from Qatar will talk about Action Plan for Inclusive Education Policy for the State of Qatar. So please register. There is a link in our chat, and I look forward to seeing you in December. Thank you again, Tatiana, and bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.